I found a Doberman puppy, bound in tape. What happened after changed my life forever. That morning, the sun was gentle, and Riverside Park was packed. Laughter, the whir of bicycles, dogs barking, and pop music from a portable speaker tangled in the air. Frank Dalton, 58. A retired firefighter was taking my morning walk coffee, still warm in my hand. Everything felt calm, almost too calm, until I saw something small and black near the leg of an iron bench. At first, I thought it was a trash bag, something left behind after a picnic. People walked past, talking, laughing. Kids darted around it. No one looked down. Then I heard it, a faint broken sound, a wheeze so warped it felt like someone gasping through a crushed throat. I froze. A chill raced up my spine. When I knelt, my heart turned to stone. Not garbage, not an old shirt. A puppy, a Doberman so tiny it could fit in the palm of my hand. Its body was bound tight in silver duct tape from neck to belly, the tape biting deep into its skin, leaving sunken red marks where blood shimmered along the edges. Its eyes were half closed, its nose cracked and dry, its stomach still. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. People kept passing, joggers, women with strollers, a few boys laughing too loudly. No one even glanced down. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, each thud like a hammer. I dropped to my knees. My hands trembled as I touched the tape. It was cold as steel. It clung to him. I tugged and skin came up with it. Blood welled. I clenched my teeth and kept going. Each strip tore with a dry, violent rip. The smell of adhesive and blood filled the air. Every time I peeled another layer, he shuddered and made a sound too soft for this world. "Oh God, who could do this?" I muttered, my voice cracking. No one answered. A woman looked over, then bent to pick up her phone. A young man walked his dog past, pulling it away as if filth might spread. The whole park roared with life except here. Here was hell. One tiny soul abandoned among hundreds of living bodies. When the last strip came off, his skin was raw and red, his spine curled from too much pressure. I plucked a gray hair from my head, held it to his nose. 1 second. 2. It fluttered. He was alive. I inhaled sharply, pulse racing. I stripped off my jacket and wrapped him inside. His skin was ice, his weight nearly nothing. I pressed him to my chest, searching for a heartbeat. Faint, but there. "Hold on, kid," I whispered. "Don't give up. I'm here." I didn't think. I just ran. Through the crowd, past the cars, coffee spilling down my wrist. People stared, but I didn't care. All I saw were those cloudy eyes, and I knew if I lost one more minute, he'd be gone. The sign for Blue Haven Veterinary Clinic flashed at the corner. I slammed the door open so hard the bell dropped from its hook. "Please save him, he's not breathing." A woman rushed out. Dr. Emily Harlan, young hair tied high, eyes sharp from seeing too much death. She snatched the puppy from my arms, laid him on the steel table. Oxygen tube, gauze, monitor hum. The air went heavy. I held my breath. The flat line stayed still. Then beep, one tone, beep, another. I sank into a chair. No words came. Only the fragile, miraculous rhythm of life fills the room again. Outside, the world kept moving, laughing, talking, alive. But only I and that tiny creature knew what had almost been lost. One small good thing the world nearly let die. I sat in the waiting room of Blue Haven Veterinary Clinic, my shirt still smeared with blood and silver tape. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw a man who looked older than he should be, tired. Eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of someone who'd been running from himself too long. Behind the steel door came the sounds of life and death monitors, beeping footsteps, metal clinking against metal. Somewhere beyond that wall, a tiny creature was fighting for breath. And I sat there like someone abandoned inside his own life. I'd once pulled people from fires, carried children out of smoke. Yet that morning my hands trembled because of a puppy. Strange how for 4 years I hadn't felt anything. No fear, no mercy, no tears. Not since Sarah, my wife, left this world. Her photo still hangs in the wooden cabin on the southern ridge of Asheville. That gentle smile, those clear eyes, the hands that used to hold me after every shift. Then cancer came. I told her I'd stay until the very end, that I wouldn't let go. But when she started to fade, I panicked. I stepped outside for a cigarette, and when I came back, she was gone. Since that day, I've saved no one. I quit the job, moved to the mountains, and buried myself in silence and rot. Every morning, I still made coffee, looked out the cabin window, and listened to birds I couldn't hear. Life became a white wall, blank and endless. Until this morning, when I found that Doberman bound in tape, something deep inside me snapped awake. Anger, fear, and that long-dead instinct, the need to save someone, anyone. The steel door opened. Dr. Emily Harlan stepped out, her lab coat marked with red streaks, her face sharp but kind. "You're the one who brought him in." I nodded. We stabilized his heartbeat. He's weak but breathing. 10 minutes later, and it would have been too late. My throat locked. All I could manage was "thank you." "Even if there's only 1%, don't stop." She nodded, once disappeared back inside. I watched her go, feeling something between relief and ache. And somehow my breath began to match the rhythm of that faint beep, beep, from the other room. When they finally let me in, I stepped closer to the steel table. The puppy lay wrapped in white cloth, a thin oxygen tube at his nose, his chest lifting in fragile waves. So small, but alive. I placed my hand on the edge, afraid even a touch might break him. Dr. Harlan said softly, "If he makes it through the night, his odds go up. But he needs someone here always." "I can do that," I said before, thinking. "I once stayed up 8 months beside a patient. I can do it again." She studied me for a moment. Maybe she saw it, the look of a man who refuses to lose another soul. That evening, I went back to my cabin. The sunset slid through the pines, touching Sarah's photo on the wall. I sat down in the wooden chair, staring at the empty space beside me. Every night for 4 years I'd sat the same way, alone, wordless, surrounded by the quiet hum of nothing. But tonight the silence wasn't empty. On the table lay a white towel from the clinic, a single black and brown hair caught in its threads. I ran my fingers over it. Warmth crept into my palm. It felt like something small but real was coming back to life. Through the window, the sun sank behind the Smoky Mountains. For a moment, I saw Sarah, her smile, her eyes, the soft glimmer of forgiveness. "You can still save," I heard her whisper somewhere deep inside. Not a person this time, but a soul, fragile and gasping, still fighting to stay. For the first time in 4 years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like it was waiting to be filled. And I knew when morning came, I'd return to Blue Haven Clinic. Not because I pitied that dog, but because I owed life one more act of redemption. The next morning, I returned to Blue Haven Veterinary Clinic earlier than I'd ever arrived anywhere in my life. The Asheville sky was a pale, washed-out blue, the first sunlight sliding across the white sign above the door. I'd never been this afraid of a morning. My hand trembled as it closed around the handle. Inside, the air was still as a chapel. The smell of disinfectant, the cold hum of fluorescent light, the steady rhythm of machines. Dr. Emily Harlan looked up when she saw me. She didn't smile, just gave a small nod. "Mr. Dalton, he's still with us, but he's not out of danger yet." I stepped toward the steel table. The tiny Doberman was curled beneath a white blanket, an oxygen tube beneath his nose, his chest rising in shallow ripples. His skin still bore the deep red grooves from the tape. On the monitor, the heartbeat line looked thinner than a strand of hair, each pulse a plea not to fade. I stood there silent, frozen. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're running fluids regulating body temperature." He was deprived of oxygen for too long. Circulation in his lower body nearly stopped. "We're doing everything we can to restart it." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the fatigue tucked between her breaths. A young nurse set a small heat lamp beside the incubator. They moved quietly, carefully, each motion a prayer disguised as routine. And I waited helpless as if for judgment. "You can touch him if you want," Emily murmured. I nodded, leaned down. When my fingertips brushed his thin fur, his body twitched. I froze. Emily's eyes softened. "That's good. Reflexes mean he hears you. He hears me." Those 3 words broke something open inside. I leaned closer and whispered, "Hey, kid, don't give up now. You've fought enough." No movement. Only the soft beep, beep, fading in and out. Then the line went flat. I felt my blood turn to ice. Emily snapped into motion. Adrenaline now. She injected the needle straight into the vein and pressed down on the puppy's chest. I heard the rhythm of her counting 1, 2, 3 between gasps of breath. The world shrank to a single sound we were all waiting for. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Then beep. Once. My throat tightened. Beep. Beep. Faint but steady. Emily exhaled, wiping sweat from her brow. "He's back." I clutched the table's edge, breath-shaking shirt clinging to my back. The little dog still lay still, but his chest rose again, fragile proof that miracles sometimes crawl back quietly. "Can I stay?" I asked. She studied me for a few seconds, then nodded. "As long as you stay calm, we'll show you how to help when he wakes." I sat in the metal chair beside the table, listening to the steady hum. Time dripped slowly, 1 heartbeat at a time. Each beep was a breath linking 2 lives together. I leaned my head back, eyes stinging. I'd heard heartbeats die out in my hands before. But that morning, I heard one learn to live again, and it made me believe that maybe God hadn't turned his back on us after all. When the sun rose fully, the light broke through the frosted glass, painting his skin in soft amber. Emily said quietly, "We need a name for the file." I looked at him and said, "Call him Ranger." She smiled faintly. "Ranger. Sounds strong." For the first time in years, I smiled too. It felt light, almost like Sarah was watching from somewhere unseen. And I knew if she were still here, she'd be doing exactly what I was doing now. By noon, Ranger was still asleep beneath his blanket, and I was still there listening to the twin rhythms, his fragile beep, beep, and the steadier one inside my chest. For the first time in 4 years, I knew I'd found a reason to stay. Ranger made it through the first night. The next morning, Dr. Emily Harlan spoke softly. "He's still weak, but he's responding well. If you're willing, you can take him home for monitoring. I'll show you exactly what to do." I nodded, unable to speak. 4 years had passed since I'd cared for anyone, even myself. But when I saw that tiny body curled inside the white towel, I knew I couldn't let him spend another night alone in that cold, sterile room. I set Ranger on the passenger seat of my old pickup. He didn't move. Every bump on the road tightened something deep in my chest. When we reached the cabin, I opened the door. Sunlight cut through dusty curtains and lit Sarah's picture on the wall. "You've got company now?" I whispered, my voice breaking. I made him a bed, a wooden crate lined with wool near the fireplace. The house, silent for years, began to breathe again. The hum of the heater, the soft rhythm of his breathing, and my own muttered prayers through the night. Every 2 hours, I mixed milk the way Emily had written down, filled a syringe, and fed him drop by drop. 1 drop he swallowed. 2 he choked. I panicked, tilted his head, and patted gently. He gasped, weak but there, and so it went night after night. I didn't sleep. Each time his breath hitched, I jolted awake, laying my hand over his chest just to feel the faint thump beneath my palm. That warmth, the proof of life, kept me from freezing inside my own emptiness. Sometimes I almost broke. The coffee went cold. The lamp burned past midnight. Ranger lay, curled his legs, twitching now and then. I watched him and saw Sarah the night she lay in that hospital bed, my hand clutching hers, unable to hold her here. Quietly, I said I won't lose anyone else. When dawn crept through the window, Ranger stirred. A small breath escaped his nose, weak and trembling. I leaned in, afraid to believe it. His eyelids fluttered open. 2 brown eyes, cloudy at first, found the glow of the fire and began to clear. I smiled, tears running before I could stop them. "Welcome back, kid." Ranger twitched his lips, trembling like he wanted to answer. I warmed a new batch of milk between my hands, fed him again, one slow drop at a time. He swallowed, carefully, tired but stubborn. When the last drop disappeared, I exhaled like a man walking out of smoke. No fire this time, only warmth. The day crawled by. I cleaned the cabin, something I hadn't done in years. Threw out the old bottles, opened the curtains, let sunlight flood the wood. Ranger slept near the fire, curled in the wool, breathing steadily. Every gust of wind through the pines made me glance down, afraid he'd wake in fear. But he didn't. He slept peacefully, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. On the 3rd night, while I was jotting notes in my journal, Ranger began to tremble. I dropped to my knees beside him. His legs tensed, a small whimper escaped. He was dreaming, maybe remembering the hands that wrapped tape around his body. I placed my hand on his chest and whispered, "It's all right, you're safe now." Ranger relaxed, sighed, and drifted back to sleep. The firelight flickered across Sarah's photo, and in that quiet moment, I understood something. Redemption doesn't always come as a miracle. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a fragile life that forces you to start breathing again. I watched Ranger sleep until the sky turned pale. The first light of morning slid across the wooden floor and touched the brown-black shine of his coat. I could hear our heartbeats, his and mine, falling into rhythm. A single rhythm of life, small, delicate, but real. And in that moment, I knew. This cabin, silent for 4 long years, was alive again. 3 weeks had passed since the night I brought Ranger home. The old wooden cabin was no longer quiet the way it used to be. Now, every morning, I woke not to an alarm clock, but to the soft click of tiny claws tapping across the floor. Ranger had survived fragile, yet full of life. Once, he could only curl in a blanket. Now he could stand on his front legs, trembling, clumsy, but determined. I laughed when he tried to walk and tumbled headfirst into the cloth. "Easy there, kid," I said. "The world's not going anywhere." Sunlight filtered through the curtains, spilling gold across his brown-black coat as new fur grew in. His skin was healing, his eyes had cleared. Every time I came close, he lifted his head, ears, drooping tail, wagging softly. No fear, no flinch, just trust, quiet and whole. On the 18th day, he barked for the first time. A small, hoarse sound, but it hit me like thunder. I'd listened to fire alarms for 30 years, but never heard anything more beautiful. It wasn't just a bark, it was life, raw and defiant. Each night I sat in my wooden chair, writing a few lines in my old notebook. Once I'd written for Sarah about fire calls, long shifts, the nights we shared soup after chaos. After she died, the pages stopped. But now I wrote again, not for her, but for Ranger. Short lines, quiet records, day 12. He finished half a bowl. Day 14, he took 3 steps. Day 18, he barked. I wrote, and for the first time in years I smiled because every word felt like a thread pulling me back from 4 years of silence. At night, Ranger curled against me by the fire. His warmth seeped through my shirt, bringing back the feeling of a real home. No more bottles on the table. No empty glass beside Sarah's photo. Only breath and wind moved softly through the pines. One morning, when I opened the door, Ranger darted out ahead of me, seeing sunlight as if for the first time. He lifted his head, squinting, and stood still, soaking in the light like he finally believed the world was safe. I looked at him then, at my hands that had saved hundreds, hands that once trembled when they couldn't save the one that mattered most. Now, those same hands had saved another life. And this time they hadn't failed. That afternoon, Dr. Emily Harlan stopped by for a checkup. She knelt, ran her fingers along Ranger's back. "He's stronger. He's lucky to have you." I smiled. "I think it's the other way around. I'm the lucky one." She looked up, paused, then said softly, "Maybe. You're learning how to live again." When she left, I sat on the porch. Ranger rested beside my boots, his head on my shoe. The forest stretched out before us, the sunset washing every pine in amber light. The air was still. The peace was real. And for the first time in years, my heart wasn't racing, it was resting. Ranger looked up at me, those warm brown eyes like chestnuts in the firelight. In them, I saw something I hadn't dared to believe in for 4 long years' hope. No words, no explanations. He understood, and so did I. We were both left behind once, but now we weren't alone. I stroked his head and whispered, "You're the last good thing this life gave me." He licked my hand, then settled against my leg, breathing slow and steady. The cabin fell quiet again, only the glow of the fire and the rhythm of 2 steady breaths. I closed my eyes, listening as his breathing matched my heartbeat. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't living in the past anymore. I was truly alive right here, right now. That afternoon, the sky over Asheville was a flawless blue, as if it had never known a cloud. The air was light, the sun golden, and the grass outside my cabin shimmered with a green so vivid it almost hurt to look at. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Ranger race in circles, a red rubber ball clenched proudly between his teeth, the one I'd bought him at the pet shop in town. He'd grown fast, strong shoulders, lean frame, eyes burning bright, no trace left of the trembling creature once wrapped in silver tape. Sometimes I wondered if miracles were real, or if they were simply the moments when people dared to believe in goodness again. Ranger was my answer. Every step he took, every hoarse bark that cracked the quiet was proof that kindness still had a place in this world. But life always tests you the moment you start to trust it again. That afternoon, Ranger chased the ball as it rolled toward the porch steps. I heard the scrape of claws against wood, and then a hard, hollow thud. I turned. Ranger lay crumpled at the bottom of the steps, hind leg twisted body trembling. The coffee cup slipped from my hand. Ranger. No, I ran, knees smashing into gravel, not feeling the pain. When I touched his chest, his heart was still beating, but wild, erratic. His eyes were open, wet, and terrified, just like the day I found him under that park bench. Without thinking, I scooped him up and ran for the truck. The road down to town had never felt so long. Every pothole was a knife. And in my head, I heard echoes of that last night with Sarah, the sirens, the hospital hallway, my empty hands. Not again, I thought. Not this time. I blew through red lights, speeding past every intersection. When the sign for Blue Haven Veterinary Clinic appeared, my heart nearly burst. I slammed the door open and shouted, "Emily, please." He fell. "He's not breathing right." Dr. Emily Harlan appeared instantly. Her voice was sharp, commanding. "Lay him on the table. Hold the head, check the pulse, call for mobile X-ray." The room erupted footsteps, machines, papers snapping. I stood, frozen, barely breathing. Ranger's breaths came shallow, punctuated by small whimpers. My throat felt lined with stone. Emily turned her hand firm on my shoulder. "Not broken," she said. "Probably dislocated and in shock. But he needs observation for 48 hours. I exhaled, collapsing into the nearest chair, my whole body hollow with relief. She smiled softly. "You should rest. Don't blame yourself. Accidents happen." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving him." That night I brought Ranger back to the cabin. I laid blankets by the fireplace, placed him gently down his leg wrapped in white gauze. Whenever he whimpered, I rested my hand on his head and whispered, "It's okay, kid. I'm here." The night dragged like falling ash. Wind pressed against the windows, mingling with Ranger's labored breaths. I didn't sleep. I just sat there watching the firelight flicker in his half-closed eyes. Every time the flames dimmed, I threw in another log, terrified the fire itself was our shared heartbeat. Near dawn, Ranger's eyes opened, faint, glassy, but aware. He licked the tip of my finger, slow and fragile. I smiled, then broke down, tears coming hard and hot. Not from fear, from release. 2 weeks later, he was walking again, steady and strong. But something in me still ached, an unfinished chapter that needed to close. So I decided to return to Riverside Park, where it all began. That morning, the air was cool, the grass slick with dew, sunlight soft as honey. The old iron bench was still there, rusted but standing proud. I walked toward it slowly, hand tight around my jacket pocket inside it, the piece of silver tape I'd kept since that first day. I sat down. Ranger rested beside me, ears perked, eyes alert, as if remembering. I unfolded the tape. It was stiff, dry, with rough edges, and faint stains of blood were still visible. With a trembling hand, I wrote, "He was found. He was loved. He made it home." I pressed the strip against the bench, smoothing it gently, sealing the past instead of tearing it away. Ranger placed one paw on the seat, then looked up at me. I understood. He remembered, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Neither was I. The park was crowded again, laughter, bicycles, children's voices bouncing in the breeze. 4 months ago, I'd stood here and thought humanity was cruel. Today, in the same place, I saw that maybe, just maybe, it was still beautiful. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Sarah, you see this? I brought him home. And maybe..." I found my way back, too. Wind swept in from the river, carrying the scent of cut grass and damp leaves. Ranger leaned his head against my leg, exhaling softly. Light shimmered in his eyes, warm, calm, alive. I stroked his head and whispered, "We did it, kid. No more chains." The wind moved through the trees, a low sound like gentle laughter. And in that moment, I could almost hear Sarah's voice whispering, "Welcome home." I closed my eyes, shoulders loosening. Sunlight slipped through the branches, catching the edge of that silver tape, glinting like a scar finally healed. It wasn't a miracle, just 2 souls, a man and a dog, finding their way back from the dark. A year had passed since the day I found Ranger under that rusted bench in Riverside Park. Spring had returned to Asheville. Sunlight draped the Smoky Mountains, pouring through the cabin window and warming the wooden floor, where Ranger dozed in peace. Every morning, he waited for me to make coffee, then rested his head on my knee like a wordless ritual we both understood. I looked at him and smiled. He was no longer the trembling skeletal puppy from that day, but a full-grown Doberman, strong and gentle. My life had changed, too. After years of silence, there was sound again. The click of paws on the floor, the creak of the door, the rhythm of breath, the bark that filled the quiet. Small sounds, but they were what kept me anchored to the world. Every weekend, Ranger and I drove to Smoky Haven Shelter, a small animal rescue on the edge of town. I fixed fences, cleaned kennels, and carried food. Ranger sat beside the new arrivals, frightened dogs, shaking eyes lost between panic and surrender. and somehow he made them calm. No barking, no wagging, just presence. He'd sit quietly close enough for them to feel safe, teaching them in silence that people could still be kind. One afternoon, a boy of about 8 came in with his mother. When he saw Ranger, he stopped. "Sir," he asked, "is this the dog from the newspaper, the one from the miracle at Riverside Park?" I nodded and smiled. "Yes, that's him." He bent down, stroked Ranger's back, and said softly, "When I grow up, I want to rescue dogs like you." I smiled, throat tightening. "You don't have to grow up to do that," I told him. "You just have to stop and help when someone needs it." The boy nodded and hugged Ranger. Ranger stood still, letting the child press his cheek against that dark fur. And in that moment, I saw it, the circle of redemption spreading outward. Later that evening, we stopped by Riverside Park. The old iron bench was still there, only now touched by new paint. Someone had seen the strip of silver tape I'd left, and instead of removing it, they'd preserved it. A quiet reminder that kindness can begin with anyone who stops long enough to care. I sat down. Ranger lay at my feet. The wind moved gently through the trees. All around us, joggers, laughter, children shouting in play. I no longer felt bitterness or grief, only gratitude. Because in a world that had once broken me, I'd found something pure, in the shape of a puppy once bound in duct tape. I whispered, "You know, Ranger, you weren't the only one saved. You saved me too." He looked up, his brown eyes catching the sunset, and in that gaze was everything I couldn't put into words. I thought of Sarah. If she were here, she'd be smiling at me, the man who once gave up on everything, now sitting in a park beside a dog, believing in miracles again. The sun sank lower, spilling honey-colored light across the French Broad River. Ranger rested his head on my leg, breathing slowly, content. I placed my hand on his head and whispered, "We made it home, kid. Maybe this was home all along." I lifted my face to the air, the scent of grass, the laughter around us, the peace settling deep in my chest. It felt clean, weightless, like truly living for the first time. I stood, and Ranger rose beside me, walking toward the fading light. Behind us, the silver strip still clung to the bench, glinting in the last rays of day, a beautiful scar, proof that wounds can heal if you stay long enough. Before leaving, I turned back to the park, to the world that once broke me, and smiled. "Thank you, Ranger," I said quietly. "Thank you for teaching me to believe again. Maybe happiness really is that simple. To stop open your heart and let a small broken soul remind you that every heart, no matter how shattered, can learn to beat again. If you've made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you truly. Because if you've listened this far, it means your heart still believes that even the smallest soul deserves a second chance. I don't know what you're going through in your own life, but I do know this hope never really dies. Sometimes it just looks like a scarred little puppy trembling alone in a park waiting for someone to stop. If you still believe kindness exists, if you believe we can help bring more Rangers into this world, then help us share this story. Hit like, share, and subscribe so together we can keep bringing light to the places the world forgot. Because sometimes the lives we rescue today become the very reason we're saved tomorrow.